Senior Inspector Engzavoth adjusted their atmospheric filtration unit as they descended through Earth's turbulent atmosphere. Their third set of eyes blinked rapidly, adjusting to the harsh sunlight reflecting off the planet's vast oceans. According to the preliminary reports, this Earth was yet another unremarkable world that had somehow managed to achieve spaceflight. Entering final approach to designated landing zone, the ship's AA announced. Local authorities have been notified. Engzavoth flicked their sensory tendrils dismissively. Another waste of council resources, they muttered, reviewing the initial scan data. Primitive nuclear fission technology, barely functional space stations, and they haven't even terraformed their nearest planetary neighbor. The landing zone came into view. A designated field outside what the locals called New Delhi. Engzavoth had specifically chosen this arrival point after noting the region's numerous challenges: environmental stress, population density, and social complexity. It would make documenting this species' shortcomings more efficient. As the ship settled onto its landing struts, the external sensors detected a sudden spike in seismic activity. Engzavoth's mapping terminal lit up with urgent notifications. A significant earthquake had just struck less than 50 kilometers away. "Wonderful," they muttered. "Local instability will only delay the assessment." But as they prepared to reschedule their evaluation, something unexpected caught their attention. Within minutes of the earthquake, their sensors detected hundreds of ground vehicles converging on the affected areas. The local information network, a primitive system they called the Internet, erupted with activity. Response teams were mobilizing, not just from the immediate vicinity, but from neighboring regions as well. Curious to spite themselves, Engzavoth directed their ship to the epicenter. The scene that unfolded below defied their expectations. Humans were working with remarkable coordination, despite having no hive mind or telepathic abilities. They moved through dangerous conditions, stabilizing structures and extracting trapped individuals with a blend of technology and sheer physical effort. "Ship, magnify Sector 4, Engzavoth commanded, focusing on a particular rescue attempt. A group of humans was attempting to reach a collapsed building where their biosensors detected multiple life signs. But what caught Engzavoth's attention wasn't the trapped humans, it was the other life signs. The locals were expending just as much effort to rescue their domesticated animals. Illogical, Engzavoth noted in their report. Species expends critical resources to save non-sentient life forms during emergency situations. Yet they couldn't help but notice the efficiency with which these rescue operations were conducted. These humans had clearly done this before, many times. As day turned to night, Engzavoth expected the rescue efforts to cease. Most species they'd evaluated would have waited for optimal conditions to resume. Instead, the humans brought in powerful lighting equipment and continued working. Their determination seemed to grow stronger as conditions worsened. The final incident that caught their attention occurred near dawn. A rescue team had located a trapped survivor, but reaching them would require traversing an unstable structure. The risk assessment was clear: a 64% chance of additional collapse. Any rational species would wait for proper equipment. The humans went in anyway. Engzavoth watched in disbelief as they formed a human chain, distributing their weight to minimize structural stress. A clever innovation born of desperate circumstances. They successfully extracted not just the survivor, but a small animal the survivor had been protecting. Later, as Engzavoth compiled their official report, they found themselves facing a dilemma. By every standard metric, technological advancement, societal uniformity, space presence, humanity barely qualified for Class D status. Yet there was something about their response to crisis, their ability to improvise and cooperate, that nagged at the inspector's carefully trained judgment. In the end, protocol won out. Inksvoth filed their report, officially classifying Earth as a Class D civilization. But for the first time in their long career, they added a personal note. Subject species displays unusual characteristics that may warrant further observation. They transmitted the report, trying to shake off their unease. After all, what could such a primitive species possibly have to teach the Galactic Council? The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with panic. Thousands of holographic representatives flickered and distorted, their images degrading with each passing moment. The quantum communication network, the pride of Council technology and the backbone of their civilization, was failing. Supreme Councillor Zarthak's voice boomed across the chamber. The outages have spread to the Carina sector. We've lost contact with another 300 systems. Their crystalline form pulsed with stress-induced bioluminescence. In the maintenance access tunnels below, Sarah Chen wiped sweat from her forehead as she calibrated the ancient backup systems the Council had never expected to use. As Earth's first human maintenance engineer in the Council headquarters, she'd spent months learning the intricacies of their technology while enduring barely concealed disdain from her alien counterparts. The quantum network's collapse had begun 3 days ago. First, minor glitches in the outer rim. Then cascading failures across entire sectors. The Council's finest engineers proposed solutions involving experimental technology and massive infrastructure projects. None of them would work in time to prevent the impending collapse of galactic civilization. Sarah listened to the debate raging above through the ventilation system. Her hands kept working even as her mind raced. The situation reminded her of something. An old story her grandmother used to tell about China's ancient postal network. "Excuse me," she called out, poking her head through a maintenance hatch. "I might have an idea." The chamber fell silent. Hundreds of alien eyes turned to stare at the dirty, sweaty human who dared interrupt their proceedings. "The maintenance worker will be removed," a security drone announced. "Wait," Supreme Councillor Zarthak raised a crystalline appendage. "In crisis, we must consider all options. Speak human." Sarah pulled herself up onto the chamber floor, acutely aware of her shabby maintenance uniform among the ornate diplomatic attire. "You're approaching this wrong. You don't need to fix the quantum network immediately. You need a stopgap measure to maintain communication until you can repair it properly." She explained her idea, using conventional faster-than-light ships as data carriers, establishing relay points at strategic locations, creating a physical network of data transport similar to ancient Earth's Pony Express, but with automated vessels. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't advanced, but it would work. Preposterous. The technocrat of Rigel's hologram sputtered. "Resorting to physical data transport like savages." "Actually," a quiet voice spoke up. Senior Inspector Engzavoth stepped forward, their sensory tendrils twitching. "I've observed humans using similar principles to maintain communication during crisis. They call it sneakernet, the practice of physically moving data when networks fail." The chamber erupted in argument. Sarah stood her ground, remembering her grandmother's words about the ancient postal workers who had kept an empire connected through monsoons, mountains, and deserts. Supreme Councillor Zarthak's voice cut through the chaos. "The human solution is primitive, but our alternatives require time we do not have. Begin implementing the proposal immediately." Within hours, the first data carriers were launched. Sarah worked with Council engineers to establish protocols, drawing on centuries of human experience in physical mail routing. The system wasn't perfect. Message delays stretched into hours instead of milliseconds, but it worked. A week later, Saga was recalibrating a relay station when Inspector Engzavoth approached her. "Your solution saved countless lives," they admitted. "But I'm curious, how did you know it would work?" Sarah smiled, thinking of her grandmother. "Humans have been dealing with communication problems since we invented writing. We've learned that sometimes the old ways are the most reliable." Engzavoth's tendrils curled thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but something troubles me. The quantum network's failure. It shouldn't have been possible. The redundancies." A sudden alarm cut through the air. Sarah's console lit up with urgent data. The backup network had detected something. Patterns in the quantum network's collapse that couldn't be natural. "Inspector," Sarah's voice was tense. "I think you're right. This wasn't an accident." Engzavoth's sensory organs dilated. "Then we have a much bigger problem than failing communications." Sarah nodded grimly. "Good thing humans have some experience solving mysteries too." Detective Maya Rodriguez stood before the Council's Security Committee, her weathered hands resting on a wooden desk that looked absurdly out of place among the advanced alien technology. Behind her, a simple whiteboard displayed handwritten notes and connecting lines, another anachronism that had drawn confused stares from the assembled aliens. "Your quantum forensics teams have found nothing because they're looking for quantum evidence," Maya explained, tapping the board with a marker. "But whoever did this knew exactly how you'd investigate. They planned for it." Inspector Engzavoth's tendrils twitched in agreement. After the discovery of sabotage patterns in the network, they had personally requested Earth send their best investigator. The Council had expected someone equipped with advanced technology. Instead, they got a detective who insisted on using paper notebooks and physical evidence boards. These attacks, Maya continued, pinning up another note, follow a pattern older than spaceflight itself. This isn't just about disrupting communications. It's about creating chaos, destroying trust. She gestured to Sarah Chen, who had been seconded to the investigation. "Show them what we found in the maintenance logs." Sarah projected a series of maintenance records. Every system failure was preceded by a routine inspection. But here's the thing. The inspectors all filed their reports through the quantum network. No physical copies, no backups. "Precisely how our protocols demand," a Council security chief interjected. "Maximum security through quantum encryption." Maya smiled. "And that's exactly what they counted on. On Earth, we learned the hard way that perfect security often creates perfect blind spots." "Sarah, show them the pattern." The maintenance logs rearranged themselves, and suddenly the Council members saw it. The inspection patterns formed a clear sequence, moving systematically through the network's critical nodes. It wasn't random failure, it was methodical destruction. "But the quantum traces," one Council member began, "are perfect." Maya cut in. "Too perfect. Like a thief wiping their fingerprints too thoroughly, leaving suspiciously clean surfaces. Back home, we call that a clue in itself." The investigation shifted gears. While the Council's quantum experts continued their sophisticated analysis, Maya and Sarah focused on the physical world. They interviewed maintenance workers, tracked physical access patterns, and built their case piece by piece. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A cleaning drone's routine visual records, considered too primitive to be worth encrypting, caught something fascinating. During each inspection preceding a failure, the investigating teams had taken exactly 3 minutes longer than standard procedures required. 3 minutes, Maya explained to a hastily convened emergency session. Just enough time to install a physical device. Something not connected to the quantum network at all. Something primitive enough to escape detection. The council chambers erupted in shock when the first device was found. Hidden behind a quantum relay node was a simple electromagnetic pulse generator, built with technology so basic it was practically invisible to advanced sensors. "This is impossible," the security chief sputtered. "The perpetrators would need intimate knowledge of our systems, high-level access." "Look at the psychological pattern," Maya urged. Who would benefit from the council being forced to rely on primitive communication methods? Who would be embarrassed by having to adopt human solutions? The pieces fell into place. A faction within the council itself, dedicated to technological purity, had orchestrated the entire crisis. They had never imagined their plan would be undone by primitive human detective work. As arrest warrants were issued, Supreme Councillor Zarthak approached Maya. "Your methods are unorthodox, but they have revealed a cancer within our society that our most advanced systems could not detect." Maya packed up her notes and dismantled her evidence board. Sometimes the old ways work best. Technology changes, but people, even alien people, leave the same kinds of traces they always have. You just have to know how to look. Exvoth, watching the human investigators pack up their primitive tools, made another note in their ongoing report about Earth. Perhaps it was time for the Council to reconsider what constituted advanced investigative techniques. The quantum network was gradually restored, but something had changed in the Council's attitude toward human methods. Sometimes they realized progress meant looking backward to move forward. The Meridian system's sun was dying, turning its once verdant third planet into a frozen wasteland. The Meridians, a species that had evolved in perpetual springtime, faced extinction. Their plea for help had drawn delegations from across the galaxy, each offering increasingly sophisticated technological solutions. Dr. Amara Patel stood before the Meridian Council, her presentation lacking the holographic flourishes and quantum simulations of the previous speakers. Instead, she had brought seeds. "Your world is dying," she began, her voice firm but compassionate. "But before you abandon it, let me tell you about Earth's Great Green Wall." The Meridian representatives, their iridescent scales dulled by stress, turned all four eyes toward her. In the observation gallery, Inspector Engzavoth and Supreme Councillor Zarthak watched with interest. After the quantum network crisis, human solutions had gained a certain credibility. Centuries ago, our Sahara Desert threatened to expand, to swallow entire nations. Amara continued. "We could have built climate control stations. Instead, we planted trees. Millions of them. We worked with nature, not against it." The Meridian chief scientist's scales flickered dismissively. "Our atmospheric modelling shows." "Your models assume your planet is dying," Amara interrupted. "We believe it's evolving, and so must you." She held up a sealed container. "These are modified versions of Earth's extremophile plants, adapted to your world's new conditions. They're not a complete solution, but they're a start." The debate raged for days. Other species offered solutions involving massive space mirrors, atmospheric processors, even planetary engines. All promised faster results than Earth's gradual approach. But Amara had an ally: time. The more elaborate solutions would take decades to implement. Her plants could start working immediately. The first test plot was planted in the planet's equatorial zone. The Meridians, desperate for hope, gathered to watch. Amara worked alongside them, teaching techniques developed over centuries of Earth's environmental struggles. "Your soil isn't dead," she explained to a young Meridian scientist, their scales brightening with interest. "It's protecting itself, waiting, just like Earth's desert soils." She demonstrated how to awaken dormant microbial life using methods perfected in Earth's harshest environments. Weeks passed. The first shoots emerged, hardy plants that thrived in the cold. But Amara's true victory came unexpectedly. A Meridian child discovered something extraordinary: native plants, long thought extinct, growing among Earth's imports. "They're adapting," Amara explained to the astonished council. "Your planet's life hasn't given up. It just needed help to bridge the gap between what was and what will be." The Meridians, inspired by Earth's example, began innovating. They combined their advanced biotechnology with Earth's centuries of environmental restoration experience. Within months, green patches began appearing across their world. But not everyone was pleased. A consortium of development corporations, which had invested heavily in planetary engineering projects, protested to the Galactic Council. "This primitive approach denies Meridians access to modern solutions," their spokesperson argued. "Earth is pursuing a policy of technological suppression." The hearing that followed would change galactic policy forever. Amara presented evidence from Earth's history: failed megaprojects, ecological disasters caused by overly ambitious engineering, and the steady success of working with natural systems. "Technology isn't always the answer," she concluded. "Sometimes the most advanced solution is letting life do what it does best: adapt and thrive." The Meridian ambassador's scales shimmered with all the colors of spring as they addressed the council. "We chose Earth's way because it empowers us. Other solutions would have made us dependent. Humans taught us not just to survive, but to grow." In private chambers afterward, Supreme Councillor Zarthak consulted with Inspector Engzavoth. First investigation, now environmental restoration. These humans have a habit of solving complex problems with simple solutions. Engzavoth's tendrils waved thoughtfully. "Perhaps we need to reconsider what advanced truly means." On Meridian, the green spaces continued to spread. More importantly, its people had learned Earth's most crucial lesson. Sometimes the path forward requires a step back, a moment to let life find its own way. Dr. Patel received countless requests from other worlds facing environmental challenges. Earth's expertise in healing wounded worlds became one of its most valued exports, though some still grumbled about its primitive methods. But as Amara often said, there's nothing primitive about survival. The Krathan fleet darkened the edges of council space, their crystalline warships reflecting starlight like predatory eyes. 3 days of diplomatic exchanges had yielded only threats. The warrior species demanded territory, resources, and recognition of their superiority. Admiral James Chen, the first human appointed to the Council Defense Committee, studied the tactical displays with an expression that puzzled his alien colleagues. He was smiling. "You find humor in our impending conflict?" General Vex Kakar of the Council forces demanded, their blade-ridged exoskeleton bristling. "Not humor," James replied. "Recognition. You're all treating the Krathan as an invasion force. I see something different: teenagers picking a fight in a bar." The council chamber erupted in confused discussions. Inspector Engzavoth, now a senior diplomatic advisor, motioned for silence. "Explain, Admiral." James gestured to the Krathan fleet formations. "Look at their positioning. It's too perfect, too aggressive. They're not trying to optimize for tactical advantage. They're posturing. They want us to see their strength." He pulled up historical records from Earth. We've seen this pattern countless times. A warrior culture that measures worth through combat encounters a more technologically advanced civilization. They can't prove their worth through economic or cultural means, so they default to what they know: confrontation. Then war is inevitable, General Vextakar concluded. No, James grinned. We're going to challenge them to a game. The proposal was radical. Invite the Crethan leadership to Earth for what humans called a war game festival. No actual combat, but competitions testing every martial skill imaginable. The council was skeptical, but with war looming, they agreed to try this human solution. The Crethan's initial response was predictably hostile, but James had included one crucial detail in the invitation. The games would be broadcast across all council space. Every civilization would witness their prowess. They arrived on Earth 2 weeks later. The games began with traditional military exercises, tactical simulations, weapon accuracy trials, strategic planning challenges. But humans had added their own events: obstacle courses, capture the flag scenarios, and team-based challenges that required cooperation even among competitors. The Crethan excelled, their natural combat abilities drawing genuine admiration from spectators. But something unexpected began to happen. After each event, human competitors would ask the Crethan about their techniques, genuinely eager to learn. Your zero-gravity combat method is fascinating, a human special forces operator told a Crethan warrior. Would you consider teaching a workshop? The Crethan, evolved for combat and trained to expect fear or hostility, found themselves increasingly confused by human responses. Here was a species that didn't deny or fear their warrior nature, but respected and wanted to learn from it. The turning point came during an unplanned event. A natural disaster struck the gaming region, a massive earthquake similar to the one Xavoth had witnessed years ago. Without hesitation, human emergency teams mobilized. To everyone's surprise, the Crethan warriors volunteered to help. They worked alongside humans, their combat training proving invaluable in rescue operations. For the first time, the Crethan experienced using their abilities to protect rather than conquer. The games concluded with a surprising announcement. The Crethan requested to establish a permanent training exchange with Earth. Their supreme commander addressed the council. We sought to prove our worth through conquest. Humans showed us we could prove it through mastery and teaching. Their warriors understand what our diplomats could not express: the need for recognition and respect. As the Crethan fleet departed peacefully, Xavoth confronted Admiral Chen. You risked galactic peace on a human psychological theory. James shrugged. Sometimes the best way to prevent a fight is to give someone a better way to prove themselves. We learned that through centuries of managing our own aggressive impulses. The Council soon received requests from other species to participate in Earth's war games. What began as a crisis resolution became a galactic tradition, with Earth hosting annual competitions that celebrated martial skill while channeling it toward constructive purposes. More importantly, the Council began to understand another unique human trait: the ability to transform potential enemies into allies by offering understanding instead of just strength or technology. As one Crethan warrior teacher later observed, humans are the only species we've met who can make peace feel like victory. Signal lost. No contact with research vessel Luminous Inquiry. Last known position, Deep Space Sector 947. The Council emergency session fell silent as the report concluded. The Luminous Inquiry carried some of the galaxy's finest scientific minds, now stranded in unexplored space. Traditional rescue protocols estimated an 8% survival chance. Captain Maria Santos of the Earth Deep Space Rescue Service stood before the Council. Her weathered orange rescue suit a stark contrast to the chamber's pristine walls. Request permission to attempt recovery. Impossible, the Council's safety administrator declared. Sector 947 is beyond mapped space. No rescue vessel called. The luminous inquiry is leaking plasma. Maria interrupted, pointing to the sensor data. They're alive but freezing. Standard Council rescue protocols won't reach them in time, but we can. Inspector Engzvoth, now a senior Council member, studied the human captain. What makes Earth's rescue service different? Maria projected an image of Earth's ancient oceans. Because before we had starships, we had storms. Before we had quantum computers, we had sinking vessels and failing radios. We learned rescue operations the hard way, through centuries of losing people and learning from each failure. Her ship, the Magellan, looked primitive compared to Council vessels. Reinforced hull plates bore scorch marks from previous rescues. The interior sacrificed aesthetics for functionality, every surface designed to aid in emergency operations. The crew was equally distinctive. Each member had served in Earth's maritime or mountain rescue services. They brought generations of rescue experience to space operations, along with something the Council found puzzling. They trained for failure. You deliberately practice failing. A Council member asked during the mission briefing. We practice everything going wrong, Maria explained, checking her rescue suit's seals. Because in real rescue operations, it usually does. The Magellan departed within the hour, carrying equipment that made Council engineers cringe. Mechanical backup systems, chemical emergency lighting, even physical paper manuals. When everything else fails, Maria told her crew, we keep going. They found the luminous inquiry 16 hours later. The research vessel hung in space, its quantum drive dead, life support failing. Standard procedure declared the situation hopeless. The Magellan's crew saw it differently. They trained for this, drilling scenarios inspired by centuries of maritime and mountain rescues. While Council ships relied on automated systems, the Magellan's crew worked with practiced precision born from generations of hard-learned lessons. Maria led the first rescue team across the void. The research vessel's hull was brittle from extreme cold, too fragile for docking. Like ancient mountain rescuers, they would have to bring the survivors out one by one. The operation that followed stunned the Council observers. The humans moved through space with a confidence that bordered on reckless, but every risk was calculated based on centuries of rescue experience. They used techniques adapted from Earth's history. Ice climbing methods to navigate the frozen hull, cave rescue protocols for the darkened corridors. Inside, they found the research team alive but fading. The aliens were shocked to see rescuers using physical ropes and mechanical tools alongside advanced technology. We adapted mountaineering techniques for zero gravity, Maria explained while securing a survivor. Ropes don't need power to work. Hour after hour, they brought survivors out. When their advanced tools failed in the extreme cold, they switched to backup systems inspired by ancient rescue operations. Every failure had a backup. Every backup had a backup. Redundancy learned through centuries of loss and sacrifice. The last survivor was evacuated minutes before the luminous inquiry's hull finally cracked. As the Magellan rushed the survivors to safety, the Council received an unexpected message from the rescued research team. We never felt fear, the lead scientist reported. These humans, they moved like they'd done this 1,000 times. Like saving lives in impossible situations was simply what they did. Later, reviewing the mission, Engsvoth asked Maria a simple question. How did you know you could succeed? Maria showed them a worn patch on her suit, bearing Earth's international rescue motto, "So others may live." Because for thousands of years, on every mountain, in every storm, humans have ventured into the impossible to save lives. Space is just another ocean, another mountain, and we never leave people behind. The Council established the Galactic Rescue Academy the following year. Its first instructors were all human. The ancient chambers of the Galactic Council had never hosted a trial quite like this. The Valkyrie and Nexar delegations, species that had coexisted peacefully for millennia, now sat on opposite sides of the room, their diplomatic channels severed over what humans might have called a cosmic misunderstanding. Ambassador Sarah Chen, once a maintenance worker, now Earth's senior diplomat, watched the proceedings with growing concern. The dispute had begun over a simple translation error in a trade agreement, but had escalated into accusations of deliberate deception. Both species translators had interpreted the same quantum data stream differently, and neither would accept the other's version. The Council cannot adjudicate this matter, Supreme Councillor Zarthak announced. Both translations appear equally valid at the quantum level. Then perhaps, Sarah suggested, rising from her seat, we should stop looking at the quantum level entirely. She had spent weeks studying both species' cultural archives. The Valkyrie, with their crystalline neural networks, processed information in pure mathematical patterns. The Nexar, being photosynthetic, understood reality through the lens of light and shadow. Both species were so advanced they had forgotten something humans learned early. Communication was more than just information exchange. I propose holding the negotiations on Earth, Sarah announced. The chamber erupted in confused whispers. Not in our cities or diplomatic facilities, but in our wilderness. Inspector Engsvoth, their role now more advisor than investigator, recognized the glint in Sarah's eye. They had seen it before, when humans were about to demonstrate something profound through seemingly primitive means. The delegations arrived at Earth's Grand Canyon during sunset. Sarah had chosen this location carefully, understanding how the play of light and shadow would resonate with the Nexar, while the mathematical patterns in the rock layers would speak to the Valkyrie. Before we discuss treaties, Sarah began, walk with me. Experience this place as your counterparts do. She guided the Valkyrie to examine the canyon's stratigraphy, showing how Earth scientists read the mathematical story of billions of years in the rocks. The Nexar she led at twilight, letting them experience how shadows changed the canyon's meaning moment by moment. Your dispute, she explained as they watched the stars emerge, isn't about translation, it's about perception. You've both become so advanced that you've forgotten how to see through each other's eyes. Over the next days, she introduced both species to human meditation practices, art therapy, and something they found revolutionary, storytelling. Humans, they realized, had millennia of experience bridging disparate worldviews through narrative. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. A young Valkyrie physicist and a Nexar cultural advisor, sharing a sunset view, began discussing how their species perceived beauty. The Valkyrie saw mathematical perfection in the angle of light rays, while the Nexar experienced the emotional resonance of color gradients. Instead of arguing about whose perception was correct, they began sharing their perspectives. Humans, the Valkyrie physicist later noted, are the only species we've encountered who routinely translate not just words, but experiences. The peace treaty that emerged was unprecedented. Instead of relying on quantum encrypted translations, it was written in three forms, mathematical equations for the Valkyrie, light pattern encodings for the Nexer, and simple human words binding them together. But the impact reached beyond one dispute. Other species began requesting Earth's meditation centers and cultural exchange programs. The primitive planet was teaching the galaxy's most advanced civilizations something they had forgotten, the art of understanding. In the council chambers, Enzvoth and Supreme Councillors Zarthak discussed this latest human innovation. They've transformed diplomatic crisis resolution, Zarthak observed, not through technology, but by reminding us of what we lost in our advancement. Enzvoth's tendrils waved thoughtfully. Perhaps that's humanity's greatest strength. They remember what we forgot. That progress isn't always about moving forward. Sometimes it's about remembering where you came from. Sarah, watching more delegations arrive at Earth's wilderness retreats, understood something her maintenance worker self never could have imagined. Humanity's primitive connection to their world, their insistence on experiencing reality through all their senses, wasn't a weakness. It was perhaps their greatest diplomatic tool. As she wrote in her report, "In teaching others to understand each other, we've helped them understand themselves. And in doing so, we've shown that the path to the future sometimes requires walking in the footsteps of the past." The reclassification ceremony was unlike anything the Galactic Council had ever held. Representatives from thousands of species filled the grand chamber, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. At the center stood Supreme Councillor Zarthak, Inspector Enzvoth, and a small delegation of humans who had transformed the galaxy's understanding of advancement. 10 cycles ago, Enzvoth began, their tendrils moving with remembered embarrassment. I classified Earth as a Class D civilization. I saw primitive technology, limited space presence, and what I thought was a chaotic, inefficient society. They paused, looking at the humans who had become colleagues and friends. I had never been more wrong. The chamber's quantum displays showed scenes from the past decade. Sarah Chen's maintenance wisdom saving the quantum network, Detective Rodriguez solving the impossible case, Dr. Puttle healing a dying world, Admiral Chen transforming enemies into allies, Captain Santos redefining the possible in deep space rescue, and Ambassador Chen bridging ancient divides. We thought advancement meant moving away from our origins. Zarthak's crystalline form pulsed with emotion. Humans taught us that true advancement means remembering where you came from while reaching for the stars. Maya Rodriguez, now head of the Galactic Investigation Bureau, stepped forward. "We never wanted to climb your classification ladder," she said. "We wanted to break it." The proposal before the Council was revolutionary. Abolish the civilization classification system entirely. Replace it with a cooperative framework where each species' unique strengths would be recognized and shared. "Look at what we've accomplished together," Sarah Chen addressed the chamber. "Your quantum technology merged with our redundancy principles. Your advanced biology combined with our environmental restoration techniques. Your warrior cultures finding honor in protection instead of conquest." Dr. Petal raised a handful of soil from the now thriving Meridian world. "This isn't just dirt," she explained. "It's a promise. That life finds a way. That adaptation is strength, and that sometimes the oldest solutions solve the newest problems." The Krythan Supreme Commander, their warrior form resplendent in ceremonial armor, stood in support. "Humans taught us that strength isn't about dominance. It's about lifting others up, about turning potential enemies into steadfast allies." Captain Santos, her rescue suit still bearing scorch marks from her latest mission, spoke next. "Every species here has something to teach and something to learn. We succeeded not because we were special, but because we were willing to learn from everyone, including our own past. As the Council prepared to vote on the new framework, a message arrived that perfectly illustrated humanity's impact. A joint Valkyrie-Nexar expedition, inspired by human exploration principles, had discovered a new phenomenon in deep space. They had named it the human paradox, a cosmic formation that could only be fully understood by combining multiple perspectives. The vote was unanimous. The classification system that had defined galactic society for millennia was dissolved. In its place rose a new organization, the Galactic Cooperation Initiative, dedicated to combining the wisdom of age with the innovation of progress. Engsvoth, watching the celebrations, approached their old friend Sarah. When I first landed on Earth during that earthquake, I thought I was seeing a primitive response to crisis. Now I understand. I was seeing the future. Sarah smiled, remembering her days in the maintenance tunnels. The future isn't about forgetting the past, she said. It's about building on it. Every human achievement that impressed the Council came from thousands of years of learning, failing, and trying again. The ceremony concluded with an ancient human tradition, the planting of a tree in the Council's central garden. A simple oak sapling, it represented everything humanity had taught the galaxy. That strength grows from humble beginnings, that progress requires patience, and that the most enduring solutions often have the deepest roots. As the diverse species mingled in celebration, Supreme Councillor Zarthak made a final observation. Humans didn't become Earth's most respected species by trying to be like us. They did it by teaching us to remember who we were, even as we reached for who we could become. In the garden, the oak sapling reached for the stars, its roots growing deep into soil brought from 1,000 worlds, a living symbol of how far the galaxy had come, and how the path forward had been lit by the wisdom of the past.